Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's cooking demo. My name is Aiden, and I'm a librarian at Sunnyvale Public Library. Our presenter today is Mariah-Rose Marie, who will be demonstrating how to make Palakura pappu, one of 20 vegetarian recipes in their new book, Cook Like Your Ancestors, an illustrated guide to intuitive cooking with recipes from around the world. Mariah-Rose is an award-winning writer, illustrator, and educator whose work can be found on Netflix and HBO Max, in The New Yorker, and in the nonfiction comics periodical, The Nib. Her new book, Cook Like Your Ancestors, is a fully illustrated, beginner-friendly guide to intuitive cooking. Today, Mariah-Rose Marie will teach you to rely less on timers and measurements and more on the way humans have always cooked, by tasting, watching, smelling, listening, feeling, and remembering. During the program, please keep yourself muted and post your questions to the chat. If they're about what Mariah-Rose is doing, I'll pass them along at the moment. If they're more general, I'll note them and pass them along at the end. And Mariah-Rose, please take it away.
Okay, hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. This is my first time doing a cooking demo on Zoom. So yeah, like Aiden said, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to type them up in the chat and I'll do my best to keep them. I have my book right here. Thank you so much for the introduction too. And I just wanted to say that though this is a demo, it's more of just showing the technique more than anything, because it is about technique more than a recipe. Once you kind of have the thing down, you can just improvise and you know, like Aiden was saying, just go with the flow and rely on your senses to make something that just tastes really good, because that's what matters. Today's recipe is actually very, very flexible. It was given to me by a friend that I actually went to high school with. And he got it from his mom. They're from southern India, and this region, I could read the whole description too, but I won't. This region is very known for hot chili peppers, really good pickles. If you have Indian pickles, I'm not talking about like gherkins and brine. It's actually something like this that I have here. You can see this brand in a lot of places, and especially in Britain, they love it. Patex. It's like hot lime, things like this. Very, very common in this state. So this is a flexible recipe. The camera's mostly going to be down here while I show you guys everything. So I have split peas here. This is the pappu. And it's very, very easily interchanged with something like lentils. Not so much beans. I definitely say stick to peas or lentils for this, but if you happen to have red lentils or even green lentils, something like that, and you just want to get that out, this is just a really fantastic way to eat it up. So I have soaked lentils here. So it's not always preferred. A lot of people like to make this in a pressure cooker, for example, and in that instance, you don't really need to pre-soak, but I just think it helps with digestion. Like, need I say more about lentils and the bean family? It's helpful to soak it and make sure to pour off this water and get fresh cooking water to make that with. Fun fact about beans and legumes and things, they have a sort of built-in defense mechanism for the plant that serve as anti-nutrients. And by soaking this and getting rid of this water, it does help remove those toxins that can cause a lot of bloating and gas and things like that. So being a vegetarian, you know, it's really nice to have these little perks and tips to to get rid of any possible problems. So I have lentils here, or split peas rather, that I soaked overnight. You can also quick boil them, which I actually have here. I'm hosting some guests tonight, so I figured I'm just going to actually triple the recipe. So this will be very, very intuitive. This is with hot water that I poured in probably half an hour ago, and as you can see, it's essentially the same level of soaked. So if you're following along, next thing you're gonna do is pour off this water into a colander or a strainer. I'm gonna have to do that off screen because I don't want to mess up my little setup. But if you're just now joining, welcome. This recipe does go kind of fast, but I'd be happy to, yeah, ask any questions and answer them as we go along. So I got these split peas from Sprouts. If you're in the California area, it's a great store for bulk purchases. Very affordable, a lot of organic things, and pretty high turnover, so it's pretty fresh. So I've poured all the lentils into a colander. I'm gonna give them a quick rinse.
Mariah-Rose, someone is asking, could you also use mung dal?
That's a good question. I haven't tried it myself. I know that mung has a little bit of a different texture when cooked, but I'd say that there are a lot of similar recipes that do use it in this instance. I'd say go for it. The worst thing you can do is just have a slightly different texture than you expected, and I would say that that's the only thing that would really, throw anything off. But any dal sounds good. So I'm adjusting as I go here because this is so many lentils. So I think I'm like 2.5 multiplying the recipe. But yeah, here's the drained split piece, the drained pappu. And I'm going to flip open my book to make sure that I'm doing all the right things. So the recipe calls for about a half pound, 250 grams. This is probably a kilo, about 2 pounds, I'd say. Everything expands while it's soaked, as you know, so it's always good to kind of start small because just like I did, you can end up with so many lentils or peas or beans. It just expands. So let's see. We are going to add water. My friend Rishi gave me this recipe, just uses plain water and it was still just very delicious. This recipe is a little bit, for someone like me who grew up with like a Western form of cooking, you start off with aromatics, whereas this and all the tadka technique, it ends with aromatics. So you don't have to worry too much about, oh, where's the onion, where's the garlic, because low-key, I was stressing about that. So you could just, trust that all the seasoning and all the good things are going to come in later. I still like to use vegetable stock because I am a heathen and I really like this brand. Not paid advertising or anything. It's literally just a paste that's super concentrated, and it makes about 9 quarts of broth that you would otherwise buy. So it's a little expensive, but once you calculate how much you're actually paying, it's way less. And I always love to keep the jar too. So I'm going to add some filtered water. The ratio for this is, I believe, 2.5. So all that really means is to keep an eye on the level that your peas are at. This is probably like 2 inches worth of lentils. So I would say add enough water so that there's 4 inches. Yeah, it's a double ratio. I just double checked. So again, not really measuring, but I am using a measuring cup. So this is probably 4 cups of pappu, and I've added about 8 cups of water. I'm gonna add a little bit more. So if you're not using a broth, all good. Just now is the time to pretty heavily salt this up because that's going to absorb into the lentils and be really, really great. Okay. So, this is going to be the sort of intermission calm time while these cook. It's going to take a little bit. I really like to make this recipe with red lentils. After you've soaked them, it's super, super fast. These are a little bit denser, so it takes a little bit of time. But in the meantime, I guess I'll give a broth paste demonstration as well. So with something like this, you usually put in probably a spoonful into boiling water. I just do the very lazy version and take some and put it directly into the cooking thing. So it's a little bit like salting and seasoning in itself. It's quite a lot that I have in here, so I'm gonna use like this amount. Otherwise, I think about 2 quarts of broth from a container would be equivalent. And then you just sort of taste as you go. Another way to speed this up too is to boil the water before adding to it. It's always nice to just keep things going. But otherwise, just to go over materials for this recipe too, you hardly need anything. A cutting board, a knife, wooden spoon, and I would say a colander to make sure that you have the ability to strain things off. But in the meantime, we can prep the tadka. So, as described in the little recipe instructions, tadka is a noun, a verb, and a type of pan. You can see in the illustration, it usually looks dead on something like this, but in fact, it has more of a cup shape, kind of like that. And it's just a way to get all your aromatics really aromatizing. So let's see. I have ghee here, desi ghee. You can also use any kind of vegetable oil. I like olive. I also like avocado oil. It's kind of good to use something that has a high smoking point because you are going to get it cooking and bubbling. And so something like canola oil is a little bit less desired because it can be very smoky very fast and not be as subtly flavored, but use what you have. It's delicious regardless. So I don't have a tadka pan. I just have a regular cast iron. You can see it's recently seasoned. And this is perfectly fine. Honestly, any sort of containers is good as long as it has a metal bottom, I'd say. This would also probably be a good tadka pan. But I'm gonna show you all the ingredients that are going into here. So I like to use a whole head of garlic, especially for this amount of pappu. There's also curry leaves. These are really good to have fresh, but it's hard to use all of them. I believe this was about 3/4 of the package that I bought at my local Indian grocer. And I just dried it out in the sun after rinsing it very, very thoroughly. And then, made sure that there was zero moisture whatsoever and packed it into this jar. It's still so good. Very, very aromatic. Yes. So you're gonna fry these along with some other dried ingredients. I'm really, really happy because I was able to find Kashmiri chilies. As soon as I opened the bag, like my sinuses cleared. They're very hot, really, really nice. And these are difficult to find, I'd say. I never saw them before going to my local place. Whew. But if you go to any Latino market, Mexican market, they have a ton of dried chilies usually to select from. I'd say the equivalent would be if you can find cayenne, let's see, Japanese chilies or chilies japonese. They have those very, very similar. And you're going to kind of crush those up or use whole, but I like to crush them because I will actually eat them. Some people just use them to heat the taka, but you can crush them with your hand or anything like that and get that going. Cumin seed and mustard seed. Again, you can get so much of this in one package, pretty fresh at a local grocer. I talked about ingredient sourcing from specialty markets and particular ethnic markets, and you will end up with a lot of it, but if you seal it in a jar, it lasts for a really long time. If you have a lot of freezer space, it lasts for a very long time. And yeah, it's just the more the better. I'm seeing a few comments. I'm just gonna look.
Yeah, we have
Yes,
folks
freezing.
sharing advice about curry leaves.
Yes, yeah, sun dry them, crush them into powder. Freezing them is great. My mom wishes she was here with me. Thanks, Mom. Hi. And
Yeah, did you want
let's
to take the question? Can you please tell us how you became interested in cooking more intuitively versus using recipes?
yeah, sure. I have to be honest, I was raised cooking this way. Like it was really wild. You would think that with baking, it's impossible to do this because there's teaspoons, it's an exact science. But when I was pretty young, my grandmother showed me a way to measure baking soda, salt, baking powder, the really small things that make cookies or cakes hit or miss. And she just would measure them somehow in the divots of her palm and say that this is a teaspoon. She just knew. And I thought that was absolutely magical. I still have not mastered that at all. My bakes, I'm a better cook than a baker. But that always stuck with me, the way that, growing up and cooking with her, with my mom, it's really about layering, which I again talk about in the book. So I can show you right now because this is the cooking water anyway. So a layer is more than what I would use as a spoonful as I put it in the book. It is talked about as they're pretty much equivalent to the same thing, but say that you want to season this. The recipe calls for 1 spoonful of turmeric, which I have here. But instead of getting out a spoon and like really using that and focusing on it, just open it up and layer and whole, amount over the top. So this is probably, for you guys, I'd say 1 layer. I'm making roughly triple the recipe, so I'm gonna do like 3 layers. And it really has never led me astray. Just doing it in this manner, you just tasting as you go is really, really important. I feel so on the spot because I never really talk about it. I just do it. But definitely what got me interested in sharing this is just having friends come over and cooking them something and then being really impressed. And they're like, you didn't use the recipe for some fried rice, kind of simple things. And not to dig on LA, but they deserve a little roasting, and that the culture here is that nobody really cooks. It's a takeout world. And, that was not me. It's also very expensive to kind of live that way. And so I just was steady cooking all the time, and I'd have friends, especially in my early 20s, they would just come through and be like, can you please just tell me how to do this? And I get so intimidated by recipes and seeing all these ingredients. And I was like, well, you don't really need that. You can sub this for that. You can just do, there's so much pressure to make things right. And sometimes you eat things that are made right, whether it's at a restaurant or like maybe someone pretentious that I don't know. And you eat the food and you're like, okay, like I guess this is this dish, but I feel like you could have put more of the seasoning in there, for example. So it's really good to just be flexible. Don't shame other people with it. All these things got me interested because there was a time, to be honest, I had a friend who was really strict about cooking, and they were coming from more of a baking background, but they'd always kind of backseat cook with me. They'd be like, well, why aren't you doing this? And the recipe says that. And by the time we actually ate and they ate the food that I made, they were silent. They were like, okay, I'm just gonna let you do your thing. I was like, cool. But this is pretty much the seasoning for the pappu. Now I'm adding chili powder. This I actually got from my mom. They were dried cayenne peppers that I sun-dried in my window. And then I ground them up in a little spice grinder. You can make your own seasonings. It's so easy. And these are hot. I have to calm down because my partner is not as spice loving as I am. So I'm gonna just hold back a little bit. But these are cooking up pretty well and they're real yellow. It's a really beautiful dish once it's all together. Nice yellows and greens. Let's see. Oh, yes, I see. Um, my great grandparent once told me she used to measure with her fist for grains and pulses and a pinch for spices and salt. Yeah, it's extremely common to do things that way. You know, I also feel that the grandmothers and moms, but really any cooking provider, they're just making food so often that you just have to trust them. They understand that things need to look a certain way, that it needs to smell a certain way, and I find that paying attention to when they stop the pinches or when they stop the fistfuls and just kind of noting what that stage is a lot more helpful than just writing down exactly what they did. So I'm going to continue with the tadka. I brought some black peppercorns out too. It's not in the recipe, but I do like to have just a little tiny bit. It fries pretty nice. Let's see. So I'm gonna take some garlic and smash these open. Again, I'm doubling the recipe, so I'm gonna use a whole head. I like to open garlic like this, just this part of the palm. I find it's way easier than all these techniques. I feel like I see another one on Instagram every other week. That's like put them in a bowl with another bowl and shake it and do this. I'm like, just hit it. So you can really open the whole head that way. This garlic is from Costco. Came in a huge bulk pack, and I'm just now getting to the rest. So there's a little bit of green coming through. I know that's also a really controversial thing. A lot of people, a lot of cooks will say as soon as they see green coming up in the garlic head, they'll throw it out. I don't, and I know this might be Might be deeply problematic, but I just like to use what I know isn't bad necessarily. I'm gonna cut that away. And I do take out the little green part coming out in the center. So
Mariah-Rose, you mentioned before that it can be hard to talk about your cooking process because this is how you've always cooked. Was there anything that was particularly difficult to put to the page in your book because of that?
oh, yes. I would say the whole book. I mean, it's so hard to feel like you're doing it all the justice, especially when it's so often a sort of unspoken thing. But I did feel that after collecting all these recipes, I'm not sure if it's super clear. There's a bit of it in the introduction and in the end, but all of these recipes were actually from an open call that I asked online for people to submit to. So I only contributed about 2 recipes myself. Everything else is was offered up by people. So I asked for a recipe in just about any form, and you would not believe just the myriad ways that all of those were presented to me. There was one in particular, the dolma, that was easily maybe the most complicated recipe in the entire book, the Iraqi dolma. It had so many steps, and this was the shortest recipe I received. And so kind of working backwards and trying to make that one, I think 2 or 3 times until I got it. Um, I I was able to kind of work out what people were trying to say to me in the way that they maybe expected that I would just get it. And I also got extremely fleshed out recipes. I got some that were, for this, for example, my friend was very loose with what he offered. He was just like, just take, a bunch of handfuls of spinach and put it in. We didn't really have a set amount of pappu, for example, either. So all of that took a lot of discipline to just work everything into one particular style so that all the recipes sort of flowed. Um, so I think that was the hardest part, but it also helped me understand how to better um, share that information. I Once I had all the recipes down and in a particular format, that's when I actually went back and did the step-by-steps on very general methods and taste profiles, because I was able to say, okay, there's actually a pattern here and try to put that into words. So the garlic head is all cut up. Another thing about the tadka too is that I don't really think that yeah, you shouldn't make it unless you're about to serve it. So you'd want to have bowls ready, the papu plated, and then put it down. It doesn't hold well because it is an oil and it's meant to be eaten hot. So you wouldn't quite throw it in the fridge and reheat it later. That's what's so nice about it too, is that you can really customize what goes in there. So if someone's not so into the spicy, you can just leave out some of the chilies for that particular serving. If somebody is vegan, then you can use oil for them and not ghee. So um, I'm making enough for 2, and this will be my lunch, and possibly dinner for others later, and they can decide what can go in it. But the garlic is all cut up. The papu is cooking. It's coming up to a simmer, and again, I really encourage you to just get in here and like feel it, how cooked it is. This definitely still needs a lot more time. So once it's quite soft, it's ready to go. But for now, that's that. I'm going to get rid of this glare from my window. There we go. I hope that lighting is still good. Okay. Here we go. So the garlic is all cut up. I have a ton of serrano chilies. I don't really remember if it was recommended that the hot green chili in this recipe would be serrano or bird's eye. I know definitely if you use bird's eye, it's going to be very, very hot. And I do like a fleshy sort of pepper. The Tatka has the dried, very hot peppers, so I figured to go with serrano. But any hot green chili is fine. If you want something a little less intense, then I'd recommend like a jalapeno. I'm going to wash these and dice them up. That's gonna be for the pappu as well as the cocktail. You want me to do for one? Also as reference to, I have the pappu on pretty high heat, so just as a heads up, the flame is up there. I'm also gonna cover it, which I probably should have done earlier, but again, my friend and a lot of cooks out of India, I noticed really love to use a pressure cooker. It just really gets through legumes and things like that faster. And if you have one, I recommend it. The recipe that I wrote doesn't have pressure cooker instructions, but you should easily be able to find something similar online and sort of adapt it to that. The neighbors' gardeners have started blowing, so I really hope that you guys can't hear that.
Mac has asked, do you skim the foam off at any point or just leave it?
I do skim it actually. I take it when it's nice and boiling now. I do it once I feel like it's done. Most of this should have come off while you were rinsing it, and also the partial boil will take a lot of it, but there's always more. So these I'm just gonna let go and really build up that foam, and then I'll take that off. Yeah. Good question. I'll let you guys look at the chopping. There's really no right or wrong way to chop these chilies. I just kind of prefer a fourthing, I suppose. I'm not sure about the biology of chilies versus garlic. I know that if you want a milder flavor with garlic, the less that you chop it up, the more soft and sort of mellow it's going to be as a flavor. And if you everything from just light chopping to fully, what is the word? Mincing. To fully mincing it. Mincing will give you a much more garlicky, intense flavor. Something about the chemical makeup of the garlic itself will release more of that flavor. But as for chilies, I find that if they're hot, they're just hot. So I do sort of this method for aesthetics more than anything, and to make it easy to remove for people that might not want a whole bunch of chili. So I'm actually going to cut half of this quite small, and this will be for the tatka. As you can see, I'm leaving the seeds in it. Some people would cry. I never take the seeds out of chilies. I like the heat. Another fun fact too is that the capsaicin, which is the the compound that makes the chilies extremely hot, is actually located in the ribs, in this sort of white fleshy interior, not the seeds. The seeds definitely get a lot of the heat because they're right up against it, but if you want to get rid of the heat, make sure to take that out. But I am not, and I'm going to take these larger pieces and just throw that in with the pappu. But I am going to skim that foam off first. It's at a full boil right now, so it seems like it's perfect timing. Yes. Smells really good. If any of you guys are making it at home, hope you're enjoying the steam treatment. So the foam is gone. I have led you astray. I don't think it causes any, at least I haven't had issues with any of that affecting the flavor. It's not like meat, for example. Meat, you absolutely have to take the foam off. It just leaves a sort of grimy sort of feel to it. But with the legumes and things, I do believe that this would just be, I'm not really sure if it would be sediment or not because I cleaned this very thoroughly, but now is a good time to taste the broth and make sure that it's as salty as you want. It should be relatively salty, just about the level of salt that that you think the final dish should have. So I'm gonna taste that. And yeah, that's not salty at all. So I'm gonna end up adding more salt actually. I'm gonna leave the broth concentrate and just use that because again, this dish really does have a lot of flavor in the end. So you don't need to go too wild. Okay. And some salt here. Again, I have no idea how much that was, but I'd say that that was a layer. I don't think that was a spoonful, which is why in a lot of these recipes I just put salt to taste because a lot of people have health issues related to salt. Too much sodium is, you know, it's not great. You have to watch it, and so I wanted to make that as customizable as possible. So I'm gonna make a little bowl to clean up and put this cover back on. I'm gonna let that cook just a little bit more before adding the chilies. It's totally up to you how early you want to do that. I just like vegetables in general to have a little bit of a bite. If you put them in too early, it'll be super, super mushy. And the pappu itself is already pretty one note texture wise. So I like to have a little bit of extra. Let's see. Just check in the chat. All right. So I cannot believe it's already been 40 minutes. I'm gonna get this vodka going and it should be ready just in time. So I'm cutting the garlic in little slices. I find that if you mince it for the tadka, it can burn really, really fast. And it just, you know, it ruins the whole thing to have burnt garlic. Garlic burns so easily. And so I find that having bigger pieces is a little bit easier to keep an eye on. It's a little bit, as soon as it turns a golden color, I take it off the heat. Otherwise, you risk it burning entirely. So a little garlic tip. A lot of other people also, they will also have a cold start, I believe, or a cold fry. I'm not sure the term. I first heard it in a Szechuan Chinese style cooking video. They had a special technique for tofu that helped it not stick to the pan, which if you're a big tofu person, that is a serious problem. But if you actually put oil and the tofu all together in the pan, cold, and then start the heat. So not literally cold, just room temperature. It helps you give a little bit more control over the temperature and the amount that it sticks, I guess. So little pro tip. So this is the garlic, this is the chili for the tarka. I'm going to take these dried chilies and crush them up a bit. So anytime you're buying whole chilies, just out of a bag, or anything really, it's just good to rinse them. They can sometimes be very dusty. They go through a lot of processing. They often take the stems off and things. So it's good to go through and make sure that, for example, this is kind of what you would like it to look like, no stem, but sometimes there is some attached. So that, for example, it's really small, but it's nice to not have a stem in it. So you can rinse that, take any stem bits off, and do a little advance to this maraca sounding sort of seed pod. So just feeling these are quite fresh for dried chilies. They're pretty soft. So instead of crushing them, I'm just gonna chop them. And that should be good. Just when you're doing this, be really mindful of how much water's on them. I really squeeze these over the sink. So there should be no water. Otherwise, if you're throwing anything wet into a hot pan of oil, you already know it's not going to be that nice. So be careful about that. So these are pretty big hunks, I'd say, but you don't have to eat them. Similar to actually a lot of Szechuan style cooking. I've been really into trying to recreate this this restaurant that I really loved in Chicago. It was a Szechuan place that was just the best food ever. And so I've been trying to recreate a lot of recipes. So I'm going to keep talking about it. But they'll often throw in whole chilies, and you're not supposed to eat them. You will know if you do. It's just for the flavor. So that's what this roll is going to take on this time. This is quite hot. Okay. These are cooking real nice. Let's see how hard they are. So just pinching them in my hand, they do start to give, but we want a lot more give. We want it so soft that, like the final image and drawing, it's sort of a porridge altogether. So I'm gonna keep that going and add in some tamarind. So I see someone asked about the Szechuan place. Let's see. It is called Pot Sticker House. It's in Bridgeport, my old neighborhood. It's so good. Every time we have gone there, and we went a lot, it blew our minds. And my partner eats meat, and so he really loved just everything. They did everything so well there, and it was so affordable. I always just tipped the amount that I thought the food was actually worth. It's really nice. Let's see. A little bit of broth tips. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Stopping garlic and spices from burning by adding some liquid. It's a good tip. In this instance, you definitely don't want to add water to the tadka. It will explode. But even just having a room temperature oil to kind of bring it back down would work as well. I've done that too. So let me get all the tadka ingredients down here so you guys can see it. This is all that's going to be going in the pan. And look at me getting all caught up. I was going to show you the tamarind paste. This I found at, I can't remember if it was kind of a bougie sort of food place or if it was a different Indian grocer, but you can find this at some places. It's not too common. I will say that just getting the whole tamarind fruit, the pod, is the way to go. To be honest, I haven't cooked so much with it, but my friend said that it was extremely easy and was just saying that you can either microwave it in water, or as I put in the recipe, you can just put boiling water over a particular segment. So if you have a whole tamarind pod, you're going to take off the shell and take out that gooey goodness around one seed, and then put hot water over it. That's supposed to sit until it cools off, and you can squeeze the seed, or if you want to, and if it's still very gooey, you can just kind of take all the flesh from around that, and if you need to, mince it up. If the tamarind's very fresh, you shouldn't have to do that. So yeah, I am putting in roughly 1 spoon of this concentrate. I like to taste this as I go and see how it affects the broth, because it is quite sour, this concentrate. I know if you're like me and you weren't really raised cooking with tamarind, you just think it's this really awesome, sweet, sour sort of candy. Because I would just eat it as like in those little Mexican candy packages. And so the first time I had it, I was like, I've been lied to. But it's quite sour. If you want the full tamarind flavor, you're gonna want to add sugar. But this recipe, again, in this region of India, you do not hold back on the sour, and so it's part of the dish. So I'm gonna get a whole tablespoon, which is almost the rest of this jar, and put that in. So it made it quite dark, but I think that's more of a concentrate thing rather than the whole fruit. I don't think the whole fruit would do that, but it's cooking really well. As you can see, actually, I don't think you can see, but these have absorbed so much water. They're like double the size from when I first showed you here. So it's going real nice. I'm gonna taste it again, see where it's at. And it's getting there. To be honest, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to totally finish in 10 minutes. So I'm going to just go to the tadka and show you how it's done. So I'm going to move this back onto high heat. And keep going. I feel like I'm cheating because honestly, I've made this recipe a few times, but I use the red lentils. So those cooked so much faster. Just a pro tip for anybody who's trying to make things in under an hour. But the tadka goes very, very fast. Everything I have is chopped and ready to go, or just whole. So I am going to heat some ghee up real high. It doesn't have to be wildly high. don't let it go too hard because then it's just gonna burn your garlic. I would say if you can put your hand over it, and just feel like, if I touch this, it would burn my hand. I feel that that's plenty. The usual test I have for oil heat throughout the book is to put in a small amount of a particular ingredient and then watch that ingredient bubble. But in that case, it would already be too hot. We want to let this cook in here for a little bit before getting to the boiling point. So I'm putting a ton of ghee in here. You can't see as well, but I hope that's okay. I'm gonna do just enough for about 2 people. So those are 2 heaping spoonfuls. And I think I'm just gonna do 3 because this is my favorite part. And I love fatty stuff, so I'm not gonna hold back. Let's see. So I'm gonna let that cook. It's definitely easier to see when ghee is ready as compared to vegetable oil because it's just going to be fully melted, whereas the oil you have to keep a close watch. So we'll let that cook down. In the meantime, too, I do think it's time to add the other chili to the pappu. Just stay quite hot. So I think in total I had 5 serrano peppers, and that's cut in half to about 2. I know that the ingredients say 4 hot green chilies sliced thin, but again, this is me meeting the requests of a lower spice household. And also, I do believe those chilies would refer to smaller bird's eye. So the bigger, the better, in my opinion. Let's see. This is cooking down. And I'm just going to start adding, actually, the garlic. I think it's just a little bit easier for me to keep track of it. And I do like to have it very, again, that sort of cold start, I think is really helpful. I'm also not sure if I'm going to use all of these chilies in this amount, because again, I'm not trying to blow anybody's eyebrows off, but I will save it for myself. Okay, so I'm gonna let this go for a little bit. The ghee is still melting, and I would like to get it to the point where it's totally ready to just take in these other dry ingredients. I'll also de-stem some of these curry leaves. They did give it to me in the full branches, just super, super nice. You see the way that those are just flying off. You gotta love the sun for doing all the hard work sometimes. A lot of people like to keep these whole, honestly, or to just crush them lightly. But I believe, like someone said earlier, you can also make a powder, and that's good. I just do like to keep it relatively whole again because these can also burn. So it's good to keep track. I'm just gonna sort of crush them up in my hands, and that'll be enough. I believe the recipe calls for 5 curry leaves. This is about that. So I am doubling the recipe, however, so I'm gonna add a little bit more. Just take off these. Again, you don't really have to count, just follow your heart. It is starting to smell so good in here. The pappu is going to take a bit longer to cook than I thought, so The only other thing that needs to be added, however, is going to be spinach. I did want to show you how much I would add. I ended up buying a whole pound yesterday from one of these sort of baby spinach things. I do think that if you had, you know, those big bunches that they sell just all together, if you get 2 of those and chop them up really well, it's really great too. This is just a little bit quicker. So I would say the equivalent is truly, I would call this a handful. We all have seen the memes, I would think, maybe, of the way that spinach cooks down. You have a whole handful and suddenly it's like you put 4 leaves in there. They cook down quite a lot. And, you know, especially baby spinach has such a mild flavor. So add as much as your heart desires. It really only adds to the dish, in my opinion. Oh, yeah, thank you, Aiden, answering the tofu question. Yes, Instant Pot. If I had room in my tiny kitchen, I would have an Instant Pot for sure. And yeah, Whole Foods. You can find the tamarind concentrate at Whole Foods. That's nice. It's very convenient. So this is steady simmering. Ghee was not on. This is what I get for multitasking. But yeah, so here's how the pappu is looking right now. I'm gonna leave the lid off because I do think that I added a little bit too much water. But again, it's really not the end of the world. If you take the lid off of this, the water is gonna evaporate and you can get the exact consistency that you want. It looks like the pappu is gonna be the right texture and everything in about maybe 15 more minutes of cooking time. I'm dreaming about that Instant Pot, but it should be good. I'm not sure how you guys feel about time as we're coming on 1 hour, but I have the tadka ready pretty soon. It's on high. You can also
I don't mind us going over time if you wanted to show the whole process. It's just up to you and your schedule.
okay, sure. I'm good. I'd be happy to actually finish this out for you guys. Time flies. Oh my gosh. Um, so this is already cooking up really well. The fire was just off. It usually takes less time than that. So, wish we can get a little bit closer. Let's see. So you could really see the way that this is already starting to bubble. This is exactly what we want. So now you can add in all the rest of your ingredients. I'm going to do these Kashmiri chilies with the seeds and all. I know. Again, oops. Don't do that. It's very hot. Again, if you want a less hot chili, you can split those open and take out the ribs, just like a dry chili. Just be careful with these, especially. Maybe we even wear gloves if you're very sensitive to that. And don't touch your eyes. This is mustard seed. It comes in black or white. I like the black. I just think it looks cool. And I'm just putting in as much as my heart desires, honestly. I know that the recipe says 1 spoon, but whatever floats your boat. I love mustard. It's also a great indication of whether it's ready because these will start popping like popcorn. The cumin I also really love a lot of. It's usually something I add as a powder to any sort of stewed bean, anything, legume, anything that I'm making. So I like to add that flavor back in. Center this a little bit. Yes. So as you can see, this is going off. The garlic is starting to brown just a little bit, but I'm gonna keep going. garlic's always the first thing to cook, you know, so I like to make sure that I add everything in later so I don't end up burning the seeds or anything like that. Oh, I also like to add the serranos a little bit later, Mac. I just saw that question pop up because they'll also burn quite quickly. And I'm not gonna put in too many because I know this is already a little bit too spicy for the average person. So the garlic's going really well. So now is about the time. I'm gonna just lift it up. Hopefully the oil doesn't hit my laptop so you guys can see exactly the sort of color that I like to stop it at. This is also so much garlic, but you know, it's really, really nice to have. So I hope you can see just how much that's starting to tan at the edges. So I'm actually going to turn down the heat quite a bit. And add them chilies. Yes. You also do end up adding just a little bit of salt to this. The ghee, most ghees that you buy, they won't be salted. It's just straight up clarified butter. So if you want a little bit of that extra flavor, which you generally do in something like this, you're gonna take that off. So I have no finished pappu to add this to, and the garlic's getting quite hot. So this is a cast iron. It holds a lot of heat. So I'm just gonna end up dumping it into a bowl for later. Thank you guys for bearing with me as I do this for the first time. I'm already learning a lot. So this is perfect. The cumin is super brown and aromatic. Everything smells really good. If you could hear it, it's actually still popping, but it's definitely now not in the burn danger zone. Whereas a cast iron, some people call it a downside, but I really like it. It retains a lot of heat even after you've turned off the fire. I honestly end up using less gas, less fire to cook things when I'm using a cast iron. It's just something to keep in mind. The pappu is still taking a bit, but I would say now is the time to put in a little bit of spinach. I'm also going to come in and mash it a little bit just to give it a little bit more of the final texture that I know it should have. This is actually I think it's a muddler for cocktails, but it works pretty well for everything else too. So this will just have to keep cooking, but ideally toward the end, you're gonna add the spinach. I'm just gonna put in one bunch because again, I like it to have a little bit more body and bite by the time that it's finished. Giving it a little time to cook with the spinach is also nice because you can see exactly how much it actually cooks down to. So I'm gonna put this back on the visible eye. Let's see. And I have a little bit of a cheat here. It's just some Trader Joe's garlic naan. It was frozen. I couldn't find any at my little local place in time, so I ended up getting that. It's really good, honestly. You throw it in the oven for just a few minutes and it's pretty ready. Um, but yeah, so as you can see, the spinach cooks down quite a bit. And I am gonna just have to keep it cooking because this needs probably another 5 minutes, I would say. Let's see. Yep. I severely underestimated the staying power of the pappu. But I hope you guys were able to sort of glean exactly what I was trying to do here with making this dish. I would say that it's probably an hour and 20 minutes type dish. But again, if you're using maybe mung dal or red lentils, it would go a lot faster. But I'm gonna throw some of this in the oven and it should be just enough time to have this all ready to be plated. Um, but please, if there's any questions at all, we can chat for a little bit. I'm just gonna make this until it's ready. So
Got a question. So if you're trying a new recipe with a lot of ingredients you've never used before, do you usually go all in or do you try to edit it to make it easier for yourself?
it's a great question. It depends. I think a lot of it honestly depends on the price. Sometimes you find ingredients that are just like trying to think of an example. Um, maybe okay. So the first time I tried to make, I think it's called Monsieur Wat. It's a Ethiopian red lentil stew. It's so good. One of my favorite red lentil dishes. It calls for berbere powder, which I mentioned in the book too, because I really wanted to buy a whole jar of that. But they just had this little sort of container. It was the only place I could find it at Whole Foods, and it was like $9. And I was like, I just feel that that's not. So I held off. I tried to make all these other things, try to match it, and in the end, I did buy the real thing. I found it at an Ethiopian restaurant, and they sold a little thing that they made of it homemade, and it was much cheaper. And I do feel like if you have the funds, going in is the best. If you don't want to use it anymore, then you can just give it to someone else or have a cooking day and see how they want to do it. But but yeah. Thank you everybody who's coming through and who came through, saying goodbye. Yeah, it does seem intimidating, especially when um, a lot of stores will only sell in really big portions, but it does freeze well. And sometimes I like to split it with a friend that I know will also cook. And to get all off subject, but in a related thing is herbalism. There's so many spices and herbs that have really wonderful properties for making tinctures or balms or even kind of just aromatherapy type things. And so coriander seed, for example, I just made some fire cider. I don't want to show it to you because it looks disgusting, but it's a really great immunity booster. You put all kinds of really heavy aromatics in it, onion, garlic, and it's super anti-inflammatory and helpful for colds and flus and things. And coriander seed has like some sort of cooling, offsetting property. I'm still learning a lot about it, but I was able to use some of it in there too. But I'm throwing in the naan, and the paper's just about done. It's definitely darker than usual. I think I should have shaken the tamarind concentrate. I think a lot of the sediment went to the bottom, but it tastes really good. And the tadka's ready for it. Thank you guys so much. It's really cool.
I've linked Mariah Rose's book in the chat again. It's currently in processing, and we are hoping to get more copies. But the book did sell out right away, so it may be a while before we can get a second copy in here. But you can place your hold, and then, as usual, you would receive an email or a phone call when it's your turn. Then you can find this recipe and 19 other recipes in that book.
Yes, thank you so much. I wanted to update too that the book should be back in stock in March and able to ship out to libraries as well as personal orders for anybody. Let's see. It should also soon be available on Libby if it's not already, if you wanted to read and check out a digital copy in PDF. So yeah, I hope that shows up. I did see that the Chicago Public Library was stocking it too, so I have to double check about LA Public Library, but definitely Sunnyvale and Chicago have it. So check it out, literally. But yeah, this is about finished. But I'm gonna let you guys go as I agonize over the little details. But I'm definitely gonna put up a post of the finisher and make sure that you guys see what the final plated dish looks like too.
And I'll link that when I send out the recording.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Thanks for bearing with me, you guys. And this was really great.
Yeah, thank you for everyone for coming. In about an hour, you should receive an email from us with a link to a survey. So if you like this program and you want to see more like it, make sure to fill that survey out and let us know. And thank you so much, Mariah Rose.
Thank you. It was great to meet you and great to see all you guys.